to you before the next community conversation meeting. And thank you for sharing your comments. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Yes, I'd like to add to that. On the planning commission, when I was exiting, one of my pet things has been just that, the history of Dunnellon, and not having it. You know, once you pass Powell Road on William Street or 41 to the river, all you see is run-down, empty buildings, shanties. It's really not a beautiful sight for somebody coming through town. Even worse is you go past the river and you see partial completed buildings and so on. And so one of my things was, as Mount Dora, Helen, Georgia, a lot of these other towns that I've traveled through, is we have no theme here in this town.
Agreed.
And we were the start of the phosphate industry back in the 1890s. Mr. Ball struck phosphate here, and it created the boom from here all the way to Brooksville. And coming in, one of my fellow past planning commission members, Catherine Burns here, gave me an article, and I think I'd really like to read this, because I think it hits on both what we're looking for here is community design. And it says, this section is intended to identify positive physical attributes in a municipality and provide design goals and policies for planning in specific areas to guide private and public development. A community design section is a relatively new concept for master plans. Most community design plans are prepared for specific areas within a community, such as its downtown or specific transportation corridors. Community design deals with the built environment and its overall appearance, functions, and quality. It seeks to enhance and improve the visual and physical quality of a place through design techniques and architectural treatments. A charrette is an excellent example of practical community design exercise. For more information about this, goes on, but participation in a chariot or similar community design exercise typically results in community design plans which would ideally fit into this section of the master plan. But if you look at Mount Dora or some of these other towns that have a theme, you know, our theme is phosphate. We have nothing in town to show that in our past history, and especially as you travel from Powell Road to the river on 41, our main section of town, it would be great. We have the train depot that is our historical building and has more or less a museum of it in it, but that's the only item along the way that does it. So that would be something I'd like to see, a community design plan added to.
Thank you for sharing those comments. I appreciate that. What's your name?
Wilbur Van White.
Wilbur?
Wilbur.
Wilbur, okay.
Yeah.
So, Vinny.
Yep.
Wilbur has just volunteered. Well, don't laugh, Rich, because you just volunteered to head up the historical one. Wilbur has just volunteered to head up the design guidelines, action items, when we get to that portion in the economic development strategy. You will be the champion of that,
I
right?
am on the board of directors of the Chamber
Okay.
and Business Association, so I'd be more than happy to do that.
Thank you very much, because that's exactly what we're going to need for that. It would be perfectly appropriate for us to include action items that encourage the city to host a charrette or a series of charrettes. Does everybody know what a charrette is? No. So you'll come together as a community and you'll take out paper and you will mark on paper what you want your physical community to look like. You will actually design what your theme will be. So it's a little different, it's a lot different than the text portion that we're putting together here through the, I've got this woman first and then I'll come to you, thank you. It's different than the text portion that we'll put here. It becomes the pretty pictures of how your buildings will look. But I would encourage you to do that and be happy to include action items that push you in that direction based on that and we can include that in the strategy. So thank you for sharing that. Appreciate
If I
that.
could just piggyback on what he was saying, you know.
Quick,
if
because
we-
you're making me hold this young lady up back here.
Well, if we were to design the buildings, and every building, you know, the inside of the building doesn't matter, but the outside of the building, if it went along with the motif
Understand.
of what, you know, the boomtown era was here, the town would look a lot better.
Yeah.
And that, and to his point, when you drive through this town, there's a lot of things that you kind of go, ew.
If I go back a couple slides, or if you flip back a couple pages in your handout, one of the comments that we captured from you at the last meeting was aesthetics. So somebody, and I didn't repeat, several of you said a lot of the same things, but I didn't repeat them on the maps, but aesthetics was a common theme. So that will wind its way into this report. So thank you for sharing that. Ma'am?
My name is Evelyn Pelton Peterson. I was born and raised in Wildwood, Florida. It was the railroad hub of Central Florida. It was a seaboard railroad. It had shops, it had, and nothing's permanent but change. Would you agree? Yes. We lost everything in Wildwood, and I'm not, it was way back in the 40s. I used to have to come over here, and I entered this park when it was beautiful in the 40s and 50s. I courted there, and it was beautiful.
Come on, Valentine's
Anyway, I want to tell you something. I asked him there, I wrote that talk about the historical thing. I asked them, here lately, I've been there, I said, what happened to our little submarines? It was an attraction. They said it's in storage and we can't afford to have it anymore. And I thought, wait a minute, there's some old restoration grants. I mean, this was later. Nothing is permanent change, and change is very painful. We don't want this place to grow, but like these historical society, we've got to do it the right way.
Right.
You ask a question, dear. What do we have here? We've got a depot. Williston got a beautiful park from some grant or something. Have you been there? Mm-hmm. Beautiful place. Williston. From here to Williston on the right is something going with weeding away. I want the history of that charcoal factory. There's some of the most unique ovens there. Mm-hmm. Trees all around them. Why can't we get grants to restore, and don't lose our railroad hub that you mentioned? We got a depot. We got Crystal River,
Miss Evelyn,
nuclear plant.
You're jumping ahead in my program for tonight.
True, I've seen it.
You're jumping ahead.
No.
I'm coming back to you. Would you mind if I respectfully asked you to hold your thoughts for a couple more slides?
We got on that railroad track before they tear it up and almost.
I promise you, when we get to this portion of the program, I will start with you.
And they will pass them through.
Would you mind if I respectfully? I will start with
Since
you.
call me a young lady.
I will start with you. Remind me.
Yeah, I'm not gonna let you.
Thank you. Gentlemen. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
My name's Gordon Hart.
Gordon?
I would like to see some future development that had a little bit of culture involved. The one thing we were lacking in the world-class city apparently was a Taco Bell. So they're building out, you know, every vacant spot they can find with fast food restaurants, and that's exactly why people come and ride tubes and then don't go anywhere else. All they gotta do is go to the drive-through window and away they go with their stuff, and we end up with the trash on the side of the road.
Thank you for your comments. This woman had her hand up, gentleman in the back, and then I'll come to you. Ma'am?
Yeah, my name is Jan Cuppage. I'm a retired educator, still working as a non-contract employee. There's one of my fellow educators here. There's a little disconnect in our community between the young people, and all of you here are talking about history of Dunnellon and so on. What you're usually thinking about is people that come and laissez-faire walk the streets. Well, we have this other population in Marion County that want to get up and do things. younger people. And I think there's a very big disconnect in this community between us and what we think, how we should draw people, and people who are visiting Marion County during the winter months. If I could change this vision, I would make it a little bit stronger, and then I'll tell you why. It says within the vision, we would strive to offer its residents and visitors opportunities to enjoy the outdoors. I would like to really strive to offer with aggressive outreach. We are horse capital of the United States of America. Would anybody like to guess how many horses right now are in Marion County? And about 20% of those horses are winter residents, and they bring their owners and trainers and employees with them. Anybody want to guess how many horses? The Ocala, their development council, did a survey last year, and it knocked our socks off, literally. 50,000 horses. Our hit show brings thousands of horses and probably they've estimated $20 million to Marion County's economic development. And most of the people are staying in Ocala. We have the biggest equestrian showplace in America under construction. Okay, they're going to stay 4,000 horses on the ground. They're going to have 4 stadiums, stadium seating, boxes, restaurants, cafes, and so on. And none of those people who are going to be coming to the county are poor people. And they're younger people, they're the younger set. They don't know about Dunnellon. They don't. So we need to, get aggressive on getting Dunnellon on the map, even within our own county. Those people also come from other nations. We serve equestrian Olympic teams from 5 nations. Those people have money and they're not being offered information about particularly our sports like biking, the fact that you can do long distance biking, hiking, trail riding, and so on. We don't have the outreach even within our own community and even outside of our state. If you cross from Georgia into Florida and stop at the Florida Visitor Center, there is not a brochure or nothing for Dunnellon. I keep looking for it every time I cross the state line. It does not exist. There are outdoor enthusiast magazines out there. If we placed a 1x1 inch ad in the classifieds, we have a very weak website. It has no links to all of our amenities for outdoors enthusiasts. Okay, those people will be long-term guests and so on. Because it also, I could go on and on, but we really need to move on in that respect.
You said your name was Jan?
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. One of the things that will come out of this report will be recommended linkages for connecting the city of Dunnellon to other resources within the state. For example, Visit Florida, whereby you can put your tourism pamphlets. It can be an action item, and I'm thinking Jan may be volunteering to head up our tourism category, if you would, if I can put you down for that.
Yeah, I'm thinking that Julie and I.
We'll get into more detail. There's going to be lots more of this at the next meeting. I don't want to scare you from coming to community conversation number 3, but there will be lots more of that. But thank you for your comments. I have a gentleman back here, I have a gentleman here, and then I've got you back in the back corner. Sir.
Yes, I'm Dwight.
Dwight?
We covered a lot of territory already.
Yes.
Up at Romeo, the charcoal mill she was referring to,
Right.
that's, we cut out all the blackjack oaks was the fuel for that. That is a neat facility.
Right. Right.
It's cool looking, but That's a common theme throughout our history, is using up the resources, and that everything. The underwater boats, they are still there. They're derelict, they've been sitting there 60 years. What folks don't understand is we couldn't use them anyway, because the river is lower than it was in the 60s, and there's not enough water in the head springs to run them now anyway, but they are there. Now, as far as the phosphate history, we do have a fascinating history here. We do a lot of work at the Historical Society. To be honest, some of it is so that if outsiders come in, we can sanitize it, because it was a really, really wild place. And we do a lot of work so that if outsiders come in and write our history, we can steer them the way we want to. I mean, it was a really wild place. It's all true. Now, as far as trying to recreate it and build buildings, I mean, it's a great idea, but that's costly. A lot of what we have now is a legacy of that era. And it might be more efficient to use some of the green space that we have that is still left over from that era and turn them into parks. And they're there. I mean, they're out there. I know where they're at. I've lived here all of my life. There's some really nice places that are not built over because of issues going all the way back from that era. There's a 100-acre pit within a 2-mile radius that could be like Appalachian Trail hiking, only in reverse, going down into the ground. It's not usable to develop unless you do a black diamond kind of golf course. There's a derelict subdivision in town that's a beautiful piece of property that no one knows about, that I would like to offer to you folks when they come from town. And there's a place right in the middle of town that's of size that was the wash pit. The old timers call it the mud pit. They make a really nice park. It's not useful for anything else. And that could be our legacy, to make use of those valuable things that can't really be used for anything else.
Dwight, I'm gonna do the same thing, respectfully, I'm gonna do the same thing I did to Miss Evelyn and ask you if we could just pause this conversation for 1 minute and just focus on the vision, because we are gonna go through the exercise of identifying some of the fine assets that you have here. And Amanda and Vinny are gonna log those assets. But that's an actual portion of the presentation tonight, but those are the exact things that we want to capture. But we really need to kind of focus on the vision. This was just our first stab at it. We've got a couple of comments here already directly related to the vision. I'm hoping that you two have comments related to the vision. If it's more asset inventory, let me know and we'll do it with the asset inventory, or if it's unrelated to the vision.
It's unrelated to
either?
inventory.
It's
Unrelated to inventory.
Is it related to the vision?
I think so.
Okay, please.
My name is Marty Mohan, born and raised in a little town in Pennsylvania, noted for anthracite coal. Back in the 10s and the 20s and the 30s, coal was king. The men either worked in the coal mines or the railroad to pull the coal out of the ground. My father, luckily, was a railroader. The wives of all of those men who were working underground or in steam engines were making dresses on the second floors of all of the buildings in the downtown area. Boom. Yeah, boom is true for Pittston as it was for Dunnellon. And then the coal industry stopped when some greedy people decided it would be a good idea to mine all that hard coal from underneath the river. And the river opened up, and it filled the mines, ruined the industry. We went from boom to bust. The downtown got dilapidated. I was on the redevelopment authority for 30 years. We tried our best to be able to bring it back as we could. But when you're dealing with buildings that have 100-year-old electricity, there were fires. It was just a total disaster. We had a mayor with vision. He came in. We had a theme. We had thoughts like this, like how do you want the town to look? And little at a time, one building at a time. And partnered with businesses, people that do this for a living, and they bought the buildings, they rehabbed them, and then someone moved in and make a store, and they're living above it. And it spread in all sorts of directions. It's the most quaint little town you'd ever be able to see in your entire life. And Dunnellon can do the same thing. The question is, how do you get people to come and see the deep history? Well, I've been living here now for 4 years, and I'm hearing more about the history now than I did for anything. But it's kind of like the field of dreams. You build it and they'll come. You can't expect someone to drive through here with a tube and expect them they're going to stop and say, wow, plastic, let's talk. And it's just not going to. But you can really slow people down when they're coming through. Let them look at those buildings that are on your main street on both sides, or even spreading off into residential areas, and give them a reason to stop. Whether it's a knick-knack shop or enhance your restaurateurs to see if they can do something out on the street to be able to just make it charming, people will stop. And they're going to tell their friends. And your message is going to get out.
Mark, thank you for your comments.
Sounds like we got 3 on the committee now.
That's right. This is exactly, yes, sir. This is exactly where your action plan for your economic development strategy comes in, and this is exactly where you being engaged and going out into the community and garnering the support of your friends and your neighbors is what's going to make the difference. So thank you very much for your comments. Yes, sir. The last one, and then I think we're probably going to move on to the next segment.
If I recall, the question was, what's right or wrong or what have you with your statement. And
yeah, not right or wrong.
Okay. Correct, incorrect?
Comments.
Comments I can make on it. Well, it's very optimistic, and I think that it's completely inaccurate. It really needs to say that it strives hard not to provide access for residents and visitors in the area, and this is the problem. So, I just want this would conclude the feel-good portion of the meeting, I suppose. Dunnellon's history now, the past 30 years, this is the 3rd visioning I've been involved in. We always reach the same conclusion. We never follow through with it, because the truth is the vast majority of the people are here this evening to make sure that doesn't happen. So
that what doesn't happen?
That ecotourism doesn't happen. Most of the people
I agree with what he said.
Are retirees. They're not really concerned about the business community. There's very few business people here tonight. I'm very upset that wasn't any effort. We talked about the future of Dunnellon. I see a gentleman from the high school here. All right, if anybody under 50? All right, so the vast majority not under 50. A lot of the visionings I've been involved in, we brought in high school students because they are in fact the future, right? A lot of the people that are here are transplants as well. They're retired, so they don't really have grandchildren in the school system. They don't have sons that are working in a local factory or what have you. So they're not very invested.
I think that's a statement, that last man in Dunnellon theory. Everybody that moves here doesn't want it to change because they want it to be just as it is.
Right.
And that's what I tried to point out the last meeting. Growth is coming. You can either control it and make an identity, or you can stick your head in the sand and pretend like there's nobody else going to move here. But they're moving here, and traffic's coming through.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do with it?
I'm not agreeing with that. I'm saying that that's been my frustration over the years, is that while we say we're for ecotourism, we're actually working hard
to stop it.
Especially when it's anywhere near the docks of
Right.
council members that
Right.
live
Exactly.
on the river, which is your greatest asset, is our rivers.
What's your name, sir?
Jerry Bond.
Jerry. So it's almost like you've peeked ahead at the agenda for community conversation number 3. because community conversation number 3 is centered around stakeholder engagement, which includes reaching out to the next generation to have them participate in the long-term action plan for how we implement the economic development strategy. So I appreciate your comments, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to prove you wrong, that this is an economic development strategy that will sit on the shelf. So I thank you for your comments, and
You'd love to be
I
wrong.
will take your challenge. Last comment, and then we're gonna move on, yeah.
In regard to the vision that you have on the board of maintaining a small town charm but protecting natural resources for future generations, I think you are right on. Regardless of how we make a theme that goes along with that, sustainability and our natural resources have been the brand here for quite a while. And those are brands that we are trying not only to enforce, but we see them on our welcome signs now as we come into the city. We see them at our parks. We talk about them when we talk about the TPO and our bicycle trails. And I don't think that just because we would like a theme and we would like development that would be quaint, that we need to neglect what you have already written. Because without the Rainbow River, without the Gucci, there would not be people coming. And in my most recent past, when I was working, I was selling to people who had never been to this area in the past. I was selling homes, which is definitely a form of development, I think we could all agree. And when they came here, what they were most interested in was a natural place to call home, something that was unique, someplace where in their leisure time they could take advantage of what we had here. So I congratulate you, as I remember the last meeting, when there were people who did speak to the sustainability of our resources, because that is an issue. And I wanted to throw my hat out to you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your comments. I'm gonna take what we've heard here this evening and work on trying to refine this again. And you will see it at community conversation number 3, and we'll do this again.
You can maybe just adding historical Dunnellon in that, you know, the word historical at the beginning. It would just add that in there, that we do have a history.
Thank you. Thank you. I was here for that presentation. It was fantastic. I'm excited about that. I'm excited about that. Yeah. Oh, I was here that night. That was the night that I gave a brief presentation to the city council, and I was more excited about that presentation than I was about my presentation about this program. So. He passed me a brochure for those of you that didn't see on the Rock Ridge Phosphate Trail. So it's, if you aren't familiar with it, I would encourage you to take a look at it. But I suspect you're all well aware of it. It's pretty cool. Okay, so moving on to the next portion of our public participation component, we're going to talk about your community assets. Miss Evelyn, get ready. I'm coming to you soon. I'm coming to you.
Good.
So assets. So the assets in your community, your assets are what you consider the quality of life in your community. It's everything from physical structures like you see listed here to your rivers, to your lakes, to your parks, to your leadership, to your institutions, your places of worship, anything in your community that you value. The state of Florida, other states consider your assets. So as we go through this program, you heard me mention earlier that we're trying to help you leverage your assets. You don't want to be Williston, right? You don't want us to take the economic development strategy that Williston has and just plop it down here and do the exact same thing that Williston has, right? You don't want to be Ocala, right? We talked about Homestead earlier. You don't want to be Homestead. You don't want to be, Frostproof has done one of these programs. You don't want to be anywhere else. You are unique. We've talked about that all evening this evening. This community has its own unique assets. So why not build off of the assets that you currently have and use those to your advantage? So what we need to do in order to be able to leverage them or use them is to identify them. So that's what we're going to move into here. I mentioned the handout that's at the back for those of you that have supersonic sight. It's not me. You can take a look at those, or as I mentioned, we can provide those to you at a later point in time. Amanda is responsible for putting that wonderful list together. I think she should get a little round of applause for the time and effort. She did a great job trying to capture the things that she felt were in your community. But again, we aren't from here, so I don't want to rely on that solely, and I don't want you to just necessarily go through there and pick it apart tonight and say this isn't there, this isn't there. I would like to just hear from you what assets you consider important. It does a number of things. One, it makes us kind of truth what we've pulled together, and it also helps us to start prioritizing things that you find important. Does that make sense? So why we're doing this exercise is because you heard me say that the state of Florida is coming here. The state's coming. On March the 20th, which is the new date that the state has set for us, from 2:30 until 6 o'clock, several representatives from different state agencies are going to come to Dunnellon, and we are going to divide into groups of 5 or 6 people, and we are going to each be given a list of probably, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 or 10 different assets in your community to go and visit. And each group will have representatives of the community, it'll have some of us, and it'll have representatives from various state agencies and some federal agencies. The Department of Agriculture is always really excited about participating in this exercise, which I find very interesting, but, because it's a state program. But, and I don't mean, doesn't matter. So they will come down and they will divide up, and so the historical resources, the folks from the State Department of Historic Preservation will go and look at the historical resources. So you'll have experts that are specifically interested and knowledgeable about those resources that will go to those assets. And you will go and interview managers at those facilities, and you will also do photographs of those facilities, and you will also kind of inventory, just do a site assessment. Is the lighting good? Do you feel safe in the environment? Is the parking adequate? Is the parking safe? There's a list of questions that the state will provide to you. And it helps the state to be able to look at it and help suggest improvements, and also help with the linkages that I was mentioning earlier between other resources like the Visit Florida Tourism Agency, for example, and other such resources where you can get funding and get Dunnellon out there and on the map. So that's what's going to happen on March the 20th. It's a very fun afternoon. I've participated in this before. Yes, ma'am? I almost didn't see you. I'm sorry.
Is this going to be just for the assets in the city limits of Dunnellon? Because I know we talked about the assets. You can get funding only for assets within the city of Dunnellon, where we have so many, we also have so many great assets, Citrus, Marion, Levy County, within a 10-mile radius.
Right. So what we're going to capture here this evening is probably going to extend beyond the 2-mile radius that I showed on that map earlier. But probably what will happen when the state comes is we probably won't go beyond the 2-mile radius, just because we won't have the time. There just physically is not enough time in the course that the state gives us to do this. Were you here earlier when I talked about it? Once we're done with this exercise, the community can replicate it and go beyond the 2-mile radius. No. Oh yeah. So we drew a boundary with the heart around the city limits. It just coincidentally ended up being a heart. It's towards the beginning of the presentation. Yes, Jen?
I have a question. Could be a representative on that panel visiting from DEP.
I don't have any control over who comes. It's set up by the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity, and it's really based on who's available to come. So I don't know. That's all up to the State Department of Economic Opportunity. I can certainly ask Josh. I can make a note too. Did you ask me? I can ask Josh if there's a special request for DEP.
What is DEP?
I'm sorry, the Department of Environmental Protection.
I'd like to make a strong recommendation to extend the 2 miles, at least for something like the Head Springs at the state park. That's outside the 2 mile range, but they have to visit that to see an idea of what we have.
Agreed.
How far? I don't know.
I don't know the exact state limits.
4 miles.
4 miles. That's the Head Springs State Park. It's
It's pretty much the heart of
the
what
heart of the
everybody's
city.
talking about.
Right. Yeah, I was gonna say without the head
That's
springs,
where
there is
the
no.
theme park. It was bigger than Disney before Disney got here.
The problem, I can put it on the list. The state will actually pick the resources that we go visit. I'll asterisk it for you.
If you don't visit there, you haven't visited Dunnellon.
If you don't visit there, goodbye.
Because the river flows from there.
I will note it. I will tell you though that the resources that become available to the city won't extend beyond the city limits of the city of Dunnellon. So you just need to keep that in mind. So any funding opportunities that you have, you know, won't extend beyond the city limits of the city of Dunnellon. So just because it's from this.
This is part of the problem. You have 8,000 people that live inside Dunnellon proper. Yeah, if that. And of that, and forgive me if you live in Blue Cove, but Blue Cove has run this town, my understanding is, since time and honorarium in modern days. Okay? And they're the people that want to stop the development. Okay? And that is why we have things like Hardee's and Taco Bell and KFC and Burger King and or Wendy's and the other things of this development that
I'm
is
sorry,
not.
can we not have a lot of chatter? I think we kind of just need to be respectful of Rich speaking, and everybody has their turn, if you please.
You know, that's what's stopping proper growth in this town, is because it's so confined to such a minimal number of people, even though, as we mentioned the last meeting, you're serving a community of almost 35,000 people. But because there's this less than 8,000 number in Dunnellon proper, only things happen there. And then my understanding is there's been numerous lawsuits to stop anything that's ever been tried in the past from that one little source right there, because those people don't want to mess up their view and they're tired of people jumping on their lawns and doing things. And I can appreciate that. If I spent $500,000 on a piece of property in Blue Cove, I wouldn't want people jumping up on my property either. Okay? But that's the crux of the issue here. It's why there's been so many plans, to that gentleman's point back there, why things never happen in this town. It's why we are an undeveloped resource.
Well, I appreciate both of your comments, and I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Jeff Cascade.
Jeff, okay. I will, when I call Josh to make the DEP request, I will add that to the Head Springs, to my conversation for Josh.
Because, yeah.
I hear what you're saying.
It was a theme park, and it was as big as Disney until they made the highway interstate.
I just know from my experience in working with Josh before, he really tries to keep it contained because they only give us such a short amount of time for them to visit, and it is a common frustration in other communities as well. But that one in particular, given what you have just said to me, I will make that request of Josh. Thank you. There weren't any more questions that I was holding on, right? Okay. So strategy. So this is what we'll move into then. This is what will come out of the asset mapping. Once we understand what your assets are, then we can actually sit down and begin crafting an actual strategy for you. This is your how-to. This is your blueprint. Right? This is your action plan. This is going to have short, medium, and long-term goals. This is going to have specific action. I've got a number of volunteers already this evening to head up some specific topics, and I appreciate you donating your time. I hope I'll see all of you at the next community conversation meeting, and that I haven't completely scared you all away. But
do you want to go back into the asset list?
Yeah, I completely just jumped over the overall asset list, didn't I? Miss Evelyn.
Yeah.
You're up. So here's what we're going to do. Thanks, Vinny, because all of a sudden the meeting was going to be over, right? So here's what we're going to do. We are going to start inventorying your assets. I mean, Amanda has done a great job putting pen to paper and trying to identify what's in your community. But we're gonna start with Miss Evelyn, because I promised her that we would, and then we're gonna jump back here to Dwight, and then we're gonna, wait, no, I'm pretty good with names. I would've got there. We're gonna come to Jerry. Please don't give me any more right now, but we're gonna start identifying some of the assets, and let's not try and hit the same ones. So, because in the interest of time, I think we're scheduled till 7:30? 7:30. So you'll find that I'm a start on time and end on time. I try to be respectful of everybody's time. So Miss Evelyn, if you could give us like a handful of the assets.
Okay.
Let's limit everybody to 5 assets at the most, okay? And then you can contact me personally after, okay?
All right.
Thank you.
Are we aware that we have, our school system, I'm a retired teacher too,
Just the assets, Evelyn,
the assets
not the
we
history.
We have produced several good ball players that have turned pro. We need a big film thing to show and have those boys interviewed. Everyone wants Dan Rather. I watched Dan Rather.
Miss Evelyn, come on.
All
We're
right.
gonna be done at 7:30.
We got the boys, we got 2 Quilters Guild, we have an art studio, we have the railroad, we have the parking for getting to the depot, catch it here, ride both ways and back, like North Carolina's got. We have got a 90-year-old First Beauty queen. She was a queen on our floats the other day, Leela Evers. We've got the Dinkins families. We've got the, I read it in an Ocala magazine about the Collins family history. And why can't some of their people be interviewed, brought in on a big screen when the people stop here to catch our train?
Thank you.
And if you want them to keep going, send them to Williston. I love what you said, we're a tri-county, you know, we're trying to develop the
I think
tri-county.
Mr. Mayor said that.
I picked that up, that's great for that train to do. It'll help us out. Don't let that train leave Dunnellon.
Thank you, Miss Evelyn.
What did you say right before the art studio, Evelyn?
What, after we,
Quilting Guild.
Quilting Guild.
yes,
The Guild. We got you.
we got two.
You mentioned the
And
Guild.
they give away quilts.
Right, Quilting Guild.
I mean, they are professional.
Thank you very much. Thank
It's
you.
an art studio, it's great.
Dwight,
Yeah, I want to depend on what she has to say. Leela May is an asset to our.
She is, you don't see her in a face.
she's the 90-year-old beauty.
Leela has a Hollywood way.
Dwight, anything else?
I'll reiterate, a lot of our assets are a legacy of the phosphate era. Not a lot of the buildings are here, because they all put them up in a year and they were wooden buildings. And our town has been in transition ever since. Our business district, no one even knows where it is. It's just gone. I mean, very few people even know where the original business district was. But our real assets are a legacy of that. We had railroads. We were like a railroad hub. And there was actually one south of town. And we've utilized that with one of the rails to trails. We have another one that goes to Chiefland. And I know the state is working on that. But there is another one that the right-of-way is not there, but a lot of the grade is still there. I've done some of the due diligence on this. There is a way where we could triangulate the whole town with rails to trails. And instead of advertising our website, we could get people here just by making them go from place to place
That's what I
through
mean.
town. And we don't have to advertise that people will come. There is a way by using the legacy of the Barge Canal and the railroads over here and put the people where we want them and bring in the right type of people. I have a business that I deal with these eco-tourists. And, you know, you talk about the tubers. We get a lot of tubers and you'll have you know, I have a place on the river, I deal with it. It's not very realistic to try and monetize the tubers much anymore. They get out in town, they've been on the river 4 hours, 20% of them are hammered anyway, so there's not much more they're gonna do. They're gonna go home. The eco-tourists will want to bring in $4,000 bicycles, have kayaks on top. I mean, look around and you see it. These people stay a long time, and they spend a lot of money here, and they're good citizens. And we have everything for them because of the barge canal, and because of the railroads, and the rails to trails that we have, and the more existing opportunities. I could take you in the woods and show you where the old grades are, and some of it's doable. You know, we're spending the state's money, so we could, you know, the opportunity is there. And I can't tell you where it's at, but I can take you folks out there and show you some real opportunities.
Okay. Maybe I'll get your contact information after. I'm going to go to Jerry, and then.
Yeah, actually, they pretty much got me on the rails thing, but I do want to point out the geography of those rails is kind of unique. It runs both through the state park and through downtown and right past our depot to the other river. So you've got a great potential rail line there to move tubers, kayakers, bicyclists, what have you, from the city and your commercial district to the state park. A few years ago, there was a study out, and the state does a study every 2 years on the economic impact of
right. We talked about it at the last meeting, right?
Right. Per capita, Rainbow Springs State Park puts out considerably less than what other states throughout the city, or I'm sorry, other parks throughout the state do, because there's no connectivity between the two. And we have a rail line that can just connect the city to the state park. The other thing that I just, we are the confluence of two rivers, not just any two rivers, but two very unique rivers. I'm not going to say natural, because neither one of them are. They have a dam on them, so there's a little bit less than natural. But they are two very unique rivers, one being a northerly flowing river, and so forth. So that's all I have.
Thank you for your comments. Sir.
This area is a premier area for birders. I mean, the assets for birding here and bird and wildlife photography are almost balanced. It's a neglected aspect of this area where Lake Rousseau, Rainbow River, and Wood Creek River are major breweries for a wide variety of water birds, and some very rare ones. And I think, you know, if we push that asset, birders spend a lot of money.
Sure do. Sure do.
I mean, I can attest to that. I have folks that pay me a lot of money to come and stay for 2 months. They bring their camera and kayak the river. And another thing we have is there's folks that come, if you watch the river that race the kayaks, we need to cater to them. Those sort of folks, I mean, they have $4,000, $5,000 canoes. They're high-end folks. We want them. I think it's the tubers, but the tubers were never going to spend $4,000 on a tail. They're never going to spend that money. These folks that travel from a long way away and bring the expensive toys will.
Thank you. I've got this gentleman, this woman in the back, Jan, gentleman. Oh, I almost got you. Hi.
My name's Kevin. I think we need, one of our assets could be youth development.
Youth development.
Youth development. And I say this because I know a lot of people in this room, but youth development, if you guys are an asset, all right? We are losing young people left and right out of these high schools. They leave and they never come back. Now, if you really think about why, there's nothing here, all right? But they don't know how to start a business. I bet you there's plenty of business owners in this room. So that connection with that youth development. You know, a young man right now, he figured out how to advertise for small businesses on the internet. And I know nobody, maybe you don't use Snapchat and Instagram, things like that. Turn that business to $1 million business, but he's in Ocala. And so that's what I wanted to say, youth development, because you got all the right pieces in this room right now.
And we got our champion for our youth
And he,
workforce.
that's
Yeah, he's like,
So that's not an
he's another
asset,
one of our
that's-
assets over here.
Thank you, Kevin.
Agreed.
Thank you. Great comment, great comment. Ma'am?
just as some of the assets that we have in Dunnellon that, you know, might not be on your list, I did see Dunnellon Presbyterian Church. It's one of the oldest churches in town. But there's the Bot Springs House. That in Bot Springs is where phosphate was supposedly stories that I've been told. Mike can correct me, but phosphate was founded over in Bot Springs.
Can you spell that for me?
B-O-G-T. Some people pronounce it vote, but we here in Dunnellon pronounce it Bot. And it's a natural spring. It flows out into the Withlacoochee River. It's in the it's in the city limits of Dunnellon. But it's the old Bot House, and I was always told that it was a carriage stop. And if the lights were on, that's where they'd stop and those types of things. So that's an asset. Is that wrong?
Yeah, that's one of the assets. I wasn't gonna attach my name to that, because the same folks have owned it since 1903. But it's a really, it's almost comparable to the Marjorie Tenham Rollins house as far as historic value.
It's in my
And yet it's
backyard.
got an amazing history. The guy that lived there was one of the most charismatic and colorful characters in that period of Florida history. No, it's not much is known about him, it's just not advertised. It really needs to be preserved. And I was gonna take you folks there, but I didn't wanna advertise. It's a small town and, you know, we know why it is the way that it is. But it should be, it deserves to be preserved. I mean, it's got an amazing story.
And the last one that I want to say was our Dinkin Speed Store. Sadly, it's vacant now, but Dinkin Speed Store would make, I've always wanted to do like a brewery there or a great upscale, make like life, so there's part A. But, you know, or make that quaint restaurant with the knickknacks, the local history that could be there as well. And it's just an asset that I wish someone would purchase and do my vision of a brewery.
Jan? Thank you. I'm sorry, what was your name? Valerie, thank you. Jan?
Strictly related to your conversation is needed cultural arts center here, performance center. And we have so
Well,
much.
we're talking about your existing assets,
Yeah,
right? So you have a cultural arts
No,
center?
we do not.
Okay.
Okay, our young people in our area won't stay around here because there's no way to express, you know, what they have to offer.
Right.
But the other thing is, you tie that into an eatery. I've seen it happen in other towns. You tie in an eatery to a cultural arts performance center, and you have a big thing going on. People will come from out of town. So the other thing is, I have a magazine here called Outsiders, and again the outreach, and we were talking about the railways and so on. Here's a magazine. I don't know, 500,000 young people get this magazine, need archives, but the reason I asked about DEP coming, here's the deal. The tuber season is how many months, folks? How many months?
Driving live too long?
No, it's not live too long, because those people come in here and they spend money, you know, at our restaurants. They do. I see them there all the time. I have great conversations with those people who come to our eateries, our upper level eateries, okay? And those people are here tonight. They'll tell you who's filling those restaurants. Our two restaurants, talk about assets. There are two huge restaurants we have on our rivers. People, those parking lots, you can't get into them, okay,
Right.
especially during the tuber season. Okay, we can extend that tourism season with an association with the DEP. As a neighbor of the state park, my husband and I are invited every 3 years to a meeting at the park, and they ask us, well, we're neighbors, what would you like to see? And tying in what Kevin said, more employment for our young people. Even if they don't stay here and work, they're going to college and commuting, they need jobs. Okay, they need jobs while they're getting their education. That's how most of us got our education. Those other months, somebody do the math, I'm not good at, what, 7 months that the tubers aren't coming into the river? There's a huge asset, and I've talked with DEP, and they just kind of like, not our turn. They have just bought 260 acres, the Rainbow River Ranch, which is in our 2 mile, your map there for economic development assessment. They have no plans, okay? Here's the deal, what could be done is take that tubing parking lot, all the facilities they have there, the restroom, the little visiting center, and so on. The Cal Mountain Bike Club has offered to volunteer to take all the trails in the park, the existing trails, including the ones on the raised trail beds. It's beautiful in there. People don't have any idea what is in there. And now they have the 250 acres. They could have the biggest mountain biking trail course in the south and south. And somebody mentioned $4,000 bikes. People in Ocala got them, okay? And they bring the Pedro's Trail on the Greenway. You cannot get into that lot on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, or a Monday. People come from all over the country in the winter to go mountain biking. It sounds weird, there's no mountains out there, but there's mountain bike trails. You bring them on here.
Thank you for your comments. Rich?
I didn't, what was that, what was your name?
Jan.
Jan.
Let me
Jan brought up
introduce
a
you.
great point earlier, and I'm a horseman, and I have horses. A stable.
And I
I think it was modified at some point, and so it's not part of the historical district? Do you know anything about that? Okay.
It is in the
The
district.
history of it is that something happened and it was bypassed, it's not part of Dunnellon history, even though it is all of Dunnellon history.
It is
So that might be revisited.
they're saying it is in the historic district.
The house itself?
Yes,
Oh, it
please.
is.
We have a spectacular piece of undeveloped property just a few blocks west of here, sometimes referred to as 9 Island Cove, and it is within our CRA district. And I think it's a tremendous opportunity for some sort of ecotourism related sort of thing. And I'm not certain, but it's my impression that it's one of several corridors being considered for extending toll highway through here. And I think that would really be a disastrous loss for our community.
Sir, thank you.
Just a couple of assets. There is a fine arts center in the old library building in Dunnellon, and it's very high art. It's quite a good attraction.
Is that the same one Ms. Evelyn was talking about?
That's
Okay.
Okay. And the other is KP Hall County Park.
Yes.
It's within your
Saw it today, yes.
It's on the list.
We got
Thank you.
airplanes too, those airplanes out past me.
Radio control.
Remind me your name, please.
Anita.
Anita, thank you.
One of the things that come to mind to me as an asset is our Dunnellon Public Library.
Okay.
And at the public library, you have other services.
Right.
People that don't have a GED, they can go there, take GED classes. I mean, people who are looking for employment, they have a career source presence to get help looking for employment. So those are the things that come to mind to me as assets.
Great point, thank you.
And it's not, it's fully advertised.
Thank you.
You had asked about rural service center.
Yes.
I didn't know what that was, and I believe they may have been referring to a USDA rural service.
Oh, okay.
Now, with us being in agriculture, when I have to go to like NRCS or for some kind of USDA thing, we have to travel all the way up.
Yeah.
Very far.
Ocala, okay.
Jacksonville Road and such. But like, if you're in ag, and even if, you know, ag is transitioning to more niche agriculture or, you know, horses and whatever, USDA service centers can offer things, NRCS can offer things, and they even help with rural housing and such. I mean, I know that's federal, USDA and NRCS, but it would really help. Now, maybe not particularly me, but the area, if we're gonna keep agriculture here in any sort of form, and it's related to the ecotourism such things too, to have a more accessible, USDA service center.
So you may recall, like, I don't know, 20 minutes ago when I stopped mid-sentence and I couldn't remember what I was gonna say about the Department of Ag. Because the Department of Ag is a state agency, it was USDA usually participates in the asset mapping exercise.
USDA?
Yes, that's what I couldn't think of, so thank you.
I can talk to you about maybe on the March 20th thing, communicating some with the ag agencies and.
I don't set that up. The Florida Department of Economic Opportunity coordinates with all the agencies that participate in the event.
One of the things, just, we have this.
Miss Anita, you only gave me one thing. You only told me the library.
I gave you a couple when I gave you the services that are there.
But you got 4 more slots.
And also Project Lift. I think that's an asset for at-risk youth in our community.
I'm concerned no girls though.
There will be girls.
I've worked with them.
But I think that's a great asset. Okay, I'm done.
Okay, I'm just thinking about the service organizations that we have in our community.
Yes.
From the Masons to other organizations that are here. A lot of the churches have volunteers that do a lot of things within the community. We have the, is it Family Health Center, a center for pregnant women?
I think I saw them on the list.
So there's a lot of things in the community that are being provided by churches and by not-for-profit organizations that I think are a great asset to our community, including Annie Johnson's and some of the others that raise funds by donations, and then they give things out to the needy in the community. We have food banks. There are a lot of things that we have that are definite assets to those that are having a little bit of a tough time in our communities.
Agreed. Thank you for those comments. Ma'am, I don't know, this man got it.
Did we already set the bike trail?
Yes, we have bike trails.
And there will be campground?
Thank you. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I pointed over here. I don't want to get out of order. Boys and Girls Club? Thank you.
Just something that might not always be seen as an asset, but can be, is all the food waste.
Okay.
That's produced by schools and restaurants and community houses. It all can be composted under the proper conditions and management.
Okay,
That
thank
can be a real asset.
Thank
Such as
you.
like a community garden, community
Community
compost.
composting, yeah, several decentralized or maybe one central composting.
So this is something that's potentially a future, not something that we would go tour when the state comes. What we're doing, it's already existing. Like I said,
Yeah, I do actually operate a community composting program.
Okay.
And I have central pickup hub at
okay.
Bubble's house.
Okay.
So it is something existing that can be looked at for further development.
Okay. If you can get with one of us after the meeting and give us contact information so we can put it on the list that we provide to the state, then that would be helpful. Thank you. Ma'am, thank you for your patience. I know you were on the long list of about 9 people there, so thank you.
Main asset I feel is the ball field. Is that on the Little League field?
Yeah.
It's had some major athletes come off of that. Football players have came off of the Little League field. We travel down a road that is unsuitable to drive a car called St. Patrick. I've been trying to get that road paved forever, but that could really use some help. And the whole community, that field is never not used. There's practice that goes on out there all the time. The season's fixing to start again. The concession stands need help. There's so many people. There was a assisted living facility that came there one year and brought the residents from the assisted living facility there. And one of the women from the assisted living facility was from the movie A League of Their Own that was still alive, and she broke through the opening pit. You know, it's just a neat place, but that is a huge asset in that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
We have the Blue Run Park.
Blue Run Park? Amanda says she captured that one. Yeah.
I was gonna say, Ernie Mills Park, and the only reason I bring this up as an asset, evening jazz. I'm just, as a way to get people to come into town and stay, and when I'm done, I go eat. So it's a park that could be used more than what it could be used.
Thank you. Sir.
There is a.
Tell me your name, please. I don't.
John. There is a community garden at the Boys and Girls Club.
Okay.
That serves the whole community.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else?
One big one everybody's missing is fishing and boating.
Yeah. Just in general, fishing and boating.
That brings a lot of money into this area, a lot.
Thank you. And I know that, you know, on the overall list that Amanda put together, a lot of that's captured just, you know, by the businesses that she has listed there. So.
Out here.
Miss Evelyn?
Y'all tell me what it's called in airplanes. It used to be in that contest out here.
They have remote control. The remote control. Ma'am, please tell me your name.
District provides antique stores for a lot of people who come antique stores shopping, especially women's groups.
Antique stores. What's your name, please? You don't want to tell me your name.
I don't want to be.
You don't want to. I won't make you the volunteer. Bonnie. I won't. I'll make your friend. I don't want to assume it's your husband. I'll make your friend the volunteer. How about that? Look, he's raising his hand.
Yeah, you know, these are all wonderful ideas, and I've been sitting here thinking about, well, how could we make Dunnellon be the place for people to come as a vacation? And why don't we do something stupid, like have the biggest ball of twine in the world, or yarn, and put it on TV, and then build it as like a Christmas vacation or a summer vacation, like the movie.
Stranger things have happened.
Yeah, why not?
I'll take it home now.
It's just a dumb idea. When it put us on the map and all those other things up there would be side items to do. Crazy.
Thank you for your comments. Sir? Okay, we got about 15 minutes left, folks.
I'm probably, I don't know if I'm going to say this, but I'm one of the few that was born and raised here. As growing up in Dunnellon, I could not wait to get out. there was zero to do, zero. So the youth development is huge, because when there's something for the kids to do, the parents are going with them, every single time. So, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Kevin, you just got a partner.
How about a movie theater?
What's your name?
Patrick.
Patrick. So again, that's maybe not one of the existing assets.
Right, good.
So we just need to, I know it's really tough to kind of keep the exercises separate, right? So we've got the economic development strategy where we're talking about, you know, here are some of the things that we want to do long term, and then we have to figure in the state's involvement, which is the current things, the assets to kind of leverage to how we get to the vision. But we will make a note of that, and I
was kind of looking at your list here, and
yeah.
maybe 7 to 10 of those things are for anybody under 25.
Yes.
So, like was stated earlier, you turn 18, you graduate high school, you're gone.
So name me 3 assets that we could add to that list that currently exist for under 25.
Under 25, there is none.
There's
Are there
nothing
things that aren't
currently.
being leveraged, that aren't being capitalized on?
As far as future development? Because you said what's not on the list.
Not new things, but things that are
Things that
there.
already exist.
Things that already exist. As a child, my favorite thing to do was go to Rainbow Springs and go swimming. To go fishing on the river. You know, go tubing down the river. That's it. That's all there is for kids.
So then
Other times I was spent walking through the woods, you know, being a miscreant.
just give me 15 more minutes, folks.
Exactly.
And I heard what you said there. So as we move forward into making the recommendations for the economic development strategy, I've mentioned several times there will be an action plan that has short, mid, and long-term actions, and it'll be broken into various categories, one of which will be youth development is what I'm hearing. And so we will look at ways to perhaps recommend that somebody courts a movie theater. I'm not saying before anybody says, hey, we don't ever want a movie theater here, but tries to attract things for the community that really are directed at our youth, including actual development and skills development and soft skills development for the workforce and that sort of thing. But that really shifts into the next phase as opposed to this asset mapping phase.
Another thing for y'all to kind of take note of is, like I said, I've lived here my entire life. I have no idea where the Boys and Girls Club is. Zero.
So I'm going to put you on the tour. Are you going to come on the asset mapping? Okay. Mr. Mitchell. Okay, folks, we got 15 minutes.
I think one of our greatest assets are our entrepreneurs or our business folks. With that said, the economic, I forget just the term you use that the folks are going to be sent down here by. It's economic
The Florida Department of Economic Opportunity.
Well, I just found out that the tourist development is actually going to be put under their umbrella, is what I'm understanding. So we plan to go have a meeting. One of the things that we hope to do with our business partners is bring the tourist development into town, get with our business leaders, and start developing horse, bikes, because Ocala already is miles ahead of us. As I sit on that board, they already have some premier opportunities that they've taken advantage of.
Correct.
And so the director of the tourist industry has agreed to come over here. With that said, also, I think my wife alluded to it, our nonprofits, the folks that are out here, the boots on the ground, the folks that never say a word, they just go do the job. They're the ones that do the job. I heard eco, I've heard other things. Young man back there, the swimming holes. There's the Boy Scouts. There's other opportunities. It's sad unless you go out there and shake the bushes it's sad that there's so many folks in our area. It keeps our community a good neighborhood to live in. Do we have our deficits? Absolutely. But I appreciate you folks speaking up I'm pretty excited about something.
Thank you for
Got
sharing
some
that.
good folks.
Well, let me ask, who was surprised to see that list that was handed out tonight? The magnitude of what you have in your community, which I think we've supplemented already this evening with things that we didn't even capture. I mean, who was surprised by the list? A couple of you.
I was surprised that my pastor's name was not on there. Because his name is all the time. First one.
Okay, I saw a couple more hands here as we wind things out. Ma'am, I don't know your name, I apologize.
My name's Connie.
Connie.
For youth development, I think Dunnellon needs, and I think it's always needed, a vocational technical school. Because this is a rural community, not all the kids can go off to college. They need to learn a trade, or one of them need to learn a trade. They got a job, Inverness has one, they have one, it's a small family, you know? Everybody has to drive all the way over there, all the way over to Ocala to be trained, you know, all the way to.
Yeah, there's nothing, that's what I had to do in work too.
And it's not just for young people, because the vocational schools also have training for nurses, art classes, all kinds of STEM classes, you know, fun things for older people too.
Right, thank you. So again, that's one of those items that winds its way into the next phase, the economic development strategy.
For the 1,800 residents, Valerie, for the 1,800 residents that we have here in Dunnellon, you know, we do have, for the young people, there isn't a lot because, I mean, my grandmother was born here, so trust me, I read some of her journal. We did the exact same things that we did back in 1911. But anyway, but we do have the baseball field, we do have Pop Warner, we do have the rivers and such, but we also have, and when I used to live out of town, we'd come to Dunnellon for our Boomtown days. And that I think is one of our great assets. It's that hokey town. You've got the Queen of the Rainbow and the pie eating contest, but that's part of what makes that Dunnellon charm. And that I think it's a hard thing to get out there because everybody does a pioneer type of day, but I think that is a great thing. And we have our Jazz Up Dunnellon.
So your festivals?
So our festivals, for a small little town, we can get, and our art festival, which we just started, it's just, they've really started going in. And again, it kind of gives that history that everybody wants us to bring back in. This was it next weekend, this weekend, they're doing cracker days where they crack whip and cracking whip. So, I mean, there's a lot of neat history that we do bring that how to get that. Only 1,800 of us live in the city limits of Dunnellon. It's hard to get that information out.
Good points. Thank you, Valerie.
You're welcome.
60 seconds at the end.
At the end. Okay. Anybody else?
I was just going to mention that a lot of the churches have youth groups in the assets on their properties. They have baseball fields and basketball courts, and if we could tap into having them work together to reach out to a lot of these youth, there might be more for them to do then as well.
We should invite, you just gave me a thought for our for community conversation number 3, because I mentioned that we're going to reach out to the schools. We should reach out to the youth groups of the churches. So thank you for that. Was somebody saying something?
I'll hold my thought to the next meeting. What you just said was actually pretty awesome.
Okay. Are you sure? Well, you can share it now.
Well, if you have all the churches as being assets, then why don't they all have gardens and then you have a farmer's market in Dunnellon?
Woo! This is awesome. This is perfect. I had this woman back here first, White.
So Kevin didn't tell you, but Kevin has a teaching farm.
Yes.
And I don't know if it's within your 2-mile radius or not, but it's got to be very close. And he's got all kinds of really neat things going on out there.
Yes, he does.
What's it called, Kevin?
The Garden Doctor Teaching Farm.
The Garden Doctor Teaching Farm. Dwight, and then we're gonna wind, Dwight, and then Dane, right? And then we're gonna wind down.
Yeah, just a couple things. I just generically mentioned some of the really cool assets that we have. Mr. Meyer came up with one, that 9 Island Cove is, that is a magical place to walk through. Not many people know it's there, but it's my stomping ground as a kid. And we need to put that way up towards
Give it a big, do that, give a big slide.
priority list.
We got it, let's give it a.
Yeah, that is, yeah, put it after. I'll discuss, I've already taken one of our sitting city councilmen there and say, please, let's make this happen. Every small town in Florida wishes they had that available.
Can you tell us a little about what that is?
I mean, it's an amazing place.
Thank you.
But the other thing is, just as somebody that studies town history quite a bit, just the fact that we're coming up with a plan that's kind of unique. I know we've addressed the other ones we did in the 90s. I was here then. We didn't have the potential to it. On the road, we had, it was different. But it's very timely that we have this plan now, and somebody studied our town's history. We've never done things with a plan that was more than like 45 minutes. So I'd really like to thank the city staff for getting all this together and making it happen.
It's been alluded to, but it hasn't really been specified. The truly greatest asset here is the people that live here.
All right.
And I came here kind of as a substitute in '83 and fully intended to get out of here real quick. If anybody's ever seen the movie Doc Hollywood, that's exactly what this community is. It's carrying people, and I've seen them time and time again in special times of need to rise to the occasion. I won't bore you with all the details, but this community can really do great things when we're all working together. And it can be a whole lot of fun, too.
Thank you for sharing those comments. Let me move on here. I got a couple more slides, I think, and then I promised you that I'd let you round it out. I'm a little bit curious. Ending on a positive note. So I mentioned that the strategy, and I kind of jumped ahead, so I won't spend time on this, but the strategy is going to hopefully move you in a direction and give you some specific direction of how you can try to accomplish some action instead of just having a plan that sits on the shelf. So these are some of the things that are going to be included in your economic development strategy. It's not always typical to include a SWOT analysis, but we are going to do that. That's a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So we're going to be looking at, a little bit of a deeper drill down to kind of what we did last week, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and try and see how we can turn some of those weaknesses and threats into strengths and opportunities for you. And I've mentioned 100 times tonight that there will be an action plan, which is really what comes out of that. I was going to spend some time on the identification of community goals. I think in the essence of time this evening, I'm going to move this to our community conversation number 3, just because I mentioned I don't like to go past our allotted time and try to be respectful of your time and your family's time, but we'll talk about this in more detail next time, which is just in maybe 3 or 4 weeks.
March 12th.
March 12th.
4 weeks.
And then this is well, I guess if I had flipped the slide, we'd
you'd have found out.
had the schedule right there, so March the 12th. So in terms of the asset mapping exercise, I do need to ask you to RSVP for this exercise because what the state does is tries to make arrangements for vehicles. We'll be leaning on you to volunteer to be drivers, and we need to know how many people are coming so that we can say we need 10 drivers or 12 drivers, but I need to have a general idea. So I have cards with me, I can give you my card, it's in the presentation. You can call me, you can email me, I guess my phone number's not up there, so you can't call me, but you can call city staff and RSVP through city staff, Lonnie, right? But if we could just kind of get a head count, there's always going to be folks that just show up and they recognize that. But as much as possible, if we can get a general idea of how many folks are coming, it makes it easier. And again, if there's any special requests, if we have the request for the Department of Environmental Protection to be here and the USDA to be here, that's helpful to Josh. I'll make those recommendations to him. Again, he doesn't necessarily have control over the state agencies that may or may not be available on that date, but I will put that forward to him. But I should probably, I'll get with Lonnie and give you a date, Lonnie, for when Josh needs that, or unless he told you.
No, he hasn't said it yet.
I know he needed the asset inventory 2 weeks in advance, so maybe if we just go with the same date, so 2 weeks in advance of March 20th. So I guess by the community conversation date, if we could call it our March 12th, if we could have our RSVPs at our next meeting, sir. John.
Patrick. You have some competition on that day. A legend of Dunnellon, Mr. Dinkins, is actually speaking that evening.
At the training.
At the training.
Between 3 and 5 that day.
He's you and Josh.
Hey, just so you know, he's the guy that wrote the book.
No, I understand.
Literally.
I understand.
The day the state's coming?
Yeah.
So why don't we just bring the state over to...
That's what I was
That's the number one asset, right?
Can you do it earlier? Can you
I
do
guess
it
we can
earlier?
call Josh tomorrow. The state gave us the date and the
Yeah, I know.
time. We were hoping to actually have it in February, so that's, maybe he's at Crystal River in the morning, so maybe he can flip it with Crystal River, given that. I know he's in Crystal River in the morning, so. Thank you for sharing that, Patrick. We had no idea. Ma'am.
I just wanted to share two little things I think are assets. Gordon mentioned cultural things. We do a thing that Sweetie's Cafe once a month now. We're doing twice a month culture music on the porch. Some of you guys have been there, and I think it's pretty neat. The second thing I'm real excited about, on Earth Day, we're going to have a solar celebration at Rumble's house because we're the first business into Dunnellon to install solar panels. And you're all invited. There to talk to people. We're going to have some banks that do lending for low interest solar, and so we hope to get lots of other businesses to consider solar as well as residents. And we're going to feed you, we're going to have a band, and it should be a great celebration. Thank you. And I think that's a great.
Where do we find out information about that? Where's the information?
Where's the information for that deal?
I know where your place is because we met the other day.
Talk to Michelle. I'm hoping the Riverland News will be interested, and it'll be on my email list.
What date?
It's on my website. It's Earth Day, April 22nd. It's a Monday after Easter.
Just to add on that, House TV is now a solar provider.
I didn't know that. You're invited.
What time?
Before we close, because I would just ask, what does Lonnie do? Not everybody here is
Oh.
familiar with our community development staff. And if I can ask Lonnie Smith to stand up and Teresa Malmberg to stand up, they are our community development staff. They have worked hard.
I just assumed everybody knew the legend, so I'm sorry.
And then if we could just take a minute, because they cannot do and be successful at what they do without the support and encouragement and approvals of our city council that allow them to be able to go after this grant and line things up. So, Mayor, do you want to take a minute and introduce our city council members?
Councilman White? Woman.
Anita Williams.
to thank all of you for your time and attention this evening. I know it's a lot of information. I thought this was incredible participation. You've again given us a lot of good feedback that we will take back and try and refine. I hope you found this a good use of 2 hours of your time, and I hope again to see you at our next community conversation meeting. You can, as always, and some of you have reached out to me between the meetings, just privately. That invitation exists. You know, feel free to do that. I know some people find it uncomfortable to talk at a meeting like this. Feel free to contact me, and I look forward to seeing you at the next meeting.